Hello and welcome back to Saltwater Stories.
It's great to be back.
We have such an exciting tale to share with you today. A journey into, well, a hidden, really vibrant world beneath the ocean's surface. Imagine walking through a bustling city, okay? But instead of buildings, you've got these towering, swaying structures all around you.
Right.
And every corner is just teeming with life you maybe never even knew existed.
It's a place that truly sparks the imagination, doesn't it? It's kind of like an underwater jungle,
Yeah,
and it plays such a vital role in our planet's health, yet, many of us don't even know it's there.
exactly. So today we're going to explore what these incredible places are, why they're so crucial for everything, and hear about the amazing things people are actually doing to protect them.
Lots of inspiring work happening.
Get ready to uncover the magic of kelp forests.
Fantastic topic.
Now, you might remember an episode we shared back in March. It was called Guardians of the Kelp, and it was all about those adorable and incredibly important sea otters.
Yes, I remember that one. Those furry champions of the ocean. Absolutely crucial little animals.
Totally. Well, today we're sort of returning to talk about the spectacular places they call home, these magnificent underwater structures.
Their habitat, yeah, essential for them, and as we'll see, so much more.
So let's unpack this and really explore the wonders of these submerged habitats.
Let's get into it.
Okay, so to start us off, what exactly is a kelp forest? When we say kelp, I think some of you might picture, that green seaweed you find washed up on the beach.
Right, the stuff that gets tangled around your feet.
Yeah, but these are something much bigger, much grander, right?
That's a great distinction to make, yeah. Kelp are indeed a type of large brown algae, but they're really in a league of their own. Think of them as the really tall, fast-growing seaweed trees of the ocean.
Seaweed trees, I like that.
Yeah, and they might look like plants, with things that look like roots and stems and leaves, but they're actually a different kind of living thing altogether. They belong to a special group called straminopiles.
Straminopiles. Okay, what did that mean simply?
Well, it basically means they're not technically land plants. They're related more closely to some types of, believe it or not, water molds and diatoms. But they do something very similar to plants.
Photosynthesis.
Exactly. They photosynthesize. They use sunlight to make their own food, just like trees do on land. And what's really fascinating is how they've sort of independently evolved these complex plant-like structures to thrive in the ocean.
Ah, so it's like convergent evolution, like birds and bats both getting wings?
Precisely. A perfect example. Kelp and land plants figured out similar ways to grow tall and capture sunlight to make food, even though they're not closely related at all. It's pretty amazing.
That really is. So, okay, they're not just big seaweeds. You mentioned they're called foundation species and ecosystem engineers. What does that truly mean for, how the ocean works?
It means they literally build their own city. They create the fundamental physical structure, the walls, the floors, the shelter. You could say that literally thousands of other sea creatures need to live.
Wow. So without the kelp.
Without the kelp forest, the entire environment just changes dramatically. Imagine a rocky, kind of barren seafloor, almost like an underwater desert, right?
Yeah, not much going on.
Right. Very little complexity, not much energy. Kelp forest completely transform that. They turn it into this vibrant, multi-layered habitat, and they actively modify their physical environment in huge ways.
How so?
Well, for instance, just their dense presence creates significant drag. It actually slows down ocean currents and reduces wave energy hitting the shore.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, and that affects everything from how sediment moves around to where tiny larvae might settle. They really shape their surroundings.
So to really get how they build these underwater cities, let's look at a single kelp plant. You said it has three main parts, sort of like a tree.
Exactly. Thinking of it as an underwater tree with specialized parts is a great way to picture it.
Okay, so what's first? The bottom part.
Right. At the bottom, they have what's called a holdfast. Now, it looks a lot like roots, but here's the crucial difference.
It doesn't suck up nutrients.
Exactly. It doesn't absorb water or food from the seabed. Its job is purely to hold the kelp tightly, really tightly, to a hard, rocky surface. It's like a super strong natural glue.
Yeah.
And this tangled mess isn't just one thing. It's actually made of many small branching parts called haptera. They really grip the rock. And this intricate network also creates all these tiny hiding spots.
For little critters.
Oh, yeah. Hundreds of small invertebrates, little worms, crustaceans, tiny sea stars. It's like a bustling micro-city just within the holdfast itself.
Amazing. Okay, so from the holdfast up.
Then you have the stipe. This is like the flexible, long trunk or stem of our underwater tree. It stretches all the way from the holdfast up towards the sunlight near the surface.
So it's like the main support structure.
Right. It provides essential structural support, letting the kelp stand tall and strong, or maybe tall and flexible is better, against the ocean's currents and waves. And in some of the more advanced kelp species, like giant kelp, it even has specialized tissues inside to transport nutrients and sugars, a bit like the veins in leaves or the phloem system in trees, moving stuff around the plant.
Clever. And then the leafy parts.
Exactly. Finally, you have the blades, or sometimes called fronds. These are like the leaves. They're typically flat and wide, designed perfectly to soak up as much sunlight as possible.
And nutrients from the water.
And dissolve nutrients right from the water, yeah. Just like leaves on land. This is where all the photosynthesis happens, turning that sunlight into energy for the kelp to grow.
But wait, how do these giant seaweeds stay upright? You said the stipe is flexible and they don't have strong woody trunks like land trees. How do they reach the surface and not just flop over?
That's where their really ingenious design comes in. Many kelp species, especially the big canopy-forming ones, have these clever little gas-filled bubbles called nematocysts.
Nematocysts? Like little balloons?
Exactly like tiny balloons. They're usually found right at the base of each blade. They provide buoyancy.
So they float them upwards.
Yep. They help the stipes and blades float up towards the sunny surface where they need to be to make their food. It's basically a natural flotation device built right into their structure, holding up their underwater skyscraper.
That is brilliant.
Isn't it? The gas inside can even include things like carbon monoxide, helping them stay buoyant. It's a fantastic adaptation that ensures their blades are always in that sunlit zone, ready to capture as much light as they can.
So these amazing underwater skyscrapers, they're clearly incredible structures. But where in the world do they actually grow? Are they everywhere, or do they have like specific neighborhoods they prefer?
They definitely have preferences. Kelp forests are mostly found in the cooler waters around the world. We call these temperate and subpolar regions.
Okay, so not really tropical places usually.
Generally not near the surface, no. They thrive in clear water because they need sunlight and water that's rich in nutrients. And crucially, they need a hard, rocky place for that holdfast to anchor onto. You won't find them growing on sand or mud.
Makes sense. So where are the big hotspots?
Well, their global reach is actually vast. Estimates suggest they cover somewhere between 1.5 to maybe 2 million square kilometers of coastline.
Wow, it's huge.
It is. That's 5 to 10 times larger than the area covered by coral reefs, believe it or not. Major areas include the Pacific coast of North America. Think California, Alaska, also the North Atlantic around places like Norway and the UK.
Okay.
And then big stretches in the southern hemisphere too, coasts of Chile, Argentina, South Africa, Australia, and New Zealand. They typically grow from the low tide mark down to depths where enough sunlight can still get through, usually about 40 to 50 meters, maybe deeper if the water's really clear.
Right. That makes perfect sense for cooler places.
Yeah.
But you mentioned earlier, or maybe hinted, that they've even been found in tropical areas. That seems really surprising given their need for cool water. How does that work?
Yeah, that was a real surprise for scientists, too. What's truly fascinating here is the discovery of thriving kelp forests in deep waters and tropical places, like the Galapagos Islands and off the coast of Brazil.
Deep waters, okay.
Exactly. The surface water in these regions might be warm, maybe even nutrient poor, which kelp doesn't like. But deeper down, often at depths of 30 to maybe even 200 meters, the water stays cool. And because the surface water is often very clear in the tropics, enough light can still penetrate down there. Plus, you often get coastal upwelling, bringing nutrient-rich water up from the depths.
So it creates like a little cold water oasis deep down.
Precisely. This unique combination of conditions, cool temperatures, enough light, and nutrients allows these forests to exist in really unexpected places. It's completely changed our scientific understanding of where kelp can grow.
That's incredible.
It really expanded the known global extent of kelp forests by maybe another 23,500 square kilometers. Just shows how adaptable life can be.
Definitely. Now, you've mentioned them being like an apartment building or an underwater city a few times. Can you elaborate on that analogy? Explain how these different layers function as like distinct homes within the forest.
Absolutely. It's a very useful way to think about it. Just like a forest on land has, the canopy, the understory shrubs, the forest floor. A kelp forest has distinct vertical layers too, and each layer provides a unique kind of home for different creatures.
Okay, so the top floor.
That's the canopy. This is where the tallest kelp fronds reach the surface and spread out, almost like a floating roof. It soaks up the most sunlight.
The powerhouse.
Totally. It's the powerhouse of the ecosystem, creating vast quantities of food through photosynthesis, and it provides a sheltered environment just below the surface. For many small, non-swimming invertebrates like snails and isopods, it's actually a physical surface to live on up in the open water.
And the otters use it too, right?
That's right. It's famously a resting spot for marine mammals like sea otters. They wrap themselves in the kelp frond so they don't drift away while they sleep or eat. And this dense surface mat also creates shade below, influencing the environment underneath.
Okay, so below the canopy,
Ugh.
the middle floors.
That's the understory. This layer is made up of shorter kelp species and maybe other types of algae that don't reach the surface. It's shadier down here and calmer, protected from the full force of waves and currents by the canopy above.
So good for hiding.
Perfect hiding place. It's a crucial nursery area for juvenile fish, young rockfish, for example, trying to avoid bigger predators while they grow. It also supports a rich community of invertebrates that might graze on these shorter algae or filter food particles from the water.
And then the bottom floor?
And finally, you have the forest floor, or what scientists sometimes call the benthic assemblage. This is the seafloor itself, amongst the holdfasts. It's a darker world down here.
Who lives there?
Creatures adapted to low light conditions. Things like sponges, anemones, tunicates, those sea squirts, and even some low-lying prostrate kelp species can live here. The floor is often covered by encrusting coralline algae, too. Those pinkish crusts you see on rocks.
And the holdfasts themselves are like little apartments.
Exactly. The holdfasts themselves are complex microhabitats, providing intricate hiding spots, as we mentioned. This whole complex, multi-layered structure is a huge reason why kelp forests are just bursting with life. They offer such a diverse array of niches or jobs and homes for countless species.
So these layered structures, they sound incredibly diverse. You hear the comparison sometimes, rainforests of the sea. Are they really as rich in life as a rainforest?
They absolutely are, and that comparison, rainforests as the sea, is really well-deserved. They are recognized globally as hotspots of marine biodiversity, meaning they have a huge variety and a huge density of different living things packed into one area. Scientific surveys have documented well over 1,000 species of plants and animals associated with kelp forests in some regions.
1,000 species.
Yeah, and studies clearly show their importance. If you remove the kelp, you can see a drop of like 30% in the local species richness. It just illustrates how foundational they are to the entire ecosystem.
That's an astonishing number, 1,000 species.
Right.
What kind of creatures are we actually talking about when we say it's so rich in life?
Oh, pretty much everything you can imagine in a cool coastal environment. You'll find everything from tiny invertebrates, things like sea snails, colorful nudibranches, crabs, shrimp, sea urchins, all hiding in crevices or grazing on the kelp itself.
Okay.
Then there are many, many types of fish. Rockfish are a big one, kelp bass, lingcod, surf perch. Even commercially important species like salmon use these forests at certain life stages.
And bigger animals too.
Definitely. Marine mammals are key inhabitants. Sea otters, of course, but also harbor seals, California sea lions. They use the forest for foraging, finding food, shelter, and even protection from predators like sharks or killer whales.
I've heard even whales use them sometimes.
There have been observations, yeah. Gray whales, for instance, have been seen moving through kelp forests, possibly as a refuge from killer whales. It's still being studied.
Amazing. What about birds?
Yep, seabirds too. Birds like cormorants will actually dive right down into the canopy to hunt for fish hiding there. Gulls and terns also forage around the edges. The sheer density of life is just remarkable. Remember that holdfast example?
From Norway.
Yeah, a single kelp holdfast in Norway was found to house nearly 8,000 individual macroinvertebrates, tiny animals from 40 different species.
8,000 in one holdfast.
In one holdfast, it makes it one of the most densely populated microhabitats you can find in the marine realm, just packed with life.
It really sounds like that bustling city you described earlier. So it's not just a place to live for all these creatures, but you mentioned hiding. It's also a safe haven, especially for the young ones.
Yes, that's a crucial point. A really vital role kelp forests play is as a nursery habitat. Think of it as an underwater daycare center, basically.
Okay, daycare for fish?
Pretty much. The dense, complex network of stipes and blades provides a super safe place for baby fish and young invertebrates to hide from predators while they grow bigger and stronger.
So it helps them survive those really vulnerable early stages.
Absolutely vital for those early life stages. And that includes many species that are commercially and recreationally important fish stocks that we humans depend on. The intricate architecture offers both refuge and a rich supply of food right there. So these areas are essential for sustaining healthy ocean populations for generations.
That's so important for keeping the whole ocean system healthy and balanced. Now, beyond just providing shelter, how else do kelp forests actually fuel life in the ocean? Do they provide food?
Oh, massively. They are a huge food source. They're really at the base of a huge food web, channeling energy through the ecosystem in basically two main ways.
Okay, so what's the first way? Do animals just munch on the living kelp?
Some creatures do, yeah. Certain snails, some types of fish, maybe some crustaceans, will graze directly on the living kelp blades or stipes. But actually, a very important part of the story, and often the pathway that transfers more energy, comes from something called drift kelp.
Drift kelp, the broken pieces.
Exactly. Kelp fronds are constantly growing, but they're also shedding old parts. Or entire plants can get ripped out by big storms. This drift kelp, the broken bits and pieces, floats down to the seafloor or gets carried by currents.
And then what happens to it?
It provides food for a huge variety of organisms. Things like sea urchins and abalone absolutely love drift kelp. It's their preferred food. But it doesn't just stay in the forest. This drifting material can travel quite far, even reaching deep-sea communities miles away from the original forest.
So it's like exporting energy.
It's a massive energy subsidy, yeah. It fuels a rich food web that extends way beyond the boundaries of the forest itself. It even transports nutrients to adjacent habitats like sandy beaches where it washes ashore and deep-sea canyons. It connects different ecosystems.
So that energy from the kelp, it makes its way up the food chain to animals we might not even realize are connected. Like you mentioned salmon earlier. Does the energy get into them?
Precisely. The connection is really strong. Research using stable isotope analysis, basically tracking chemical signatures, shows that things like rockfish living on the outer coast can be half to even 3/4 kelp carbon.
Half to 3/4.
Yeah, meaning a significant portion, maybe most, of the energy that literally built their bodies ultimately came from kelp. Crabs are maybe around 25% kelp carbon.
Wow.
So when you think about that beautiful pink flesh of a salmon or the rich meat of a crab, some of those essential fatty acids, those omega-3s, probably started their journey way back in a kelp forest.
That really highlights how foundational it is.
Absolutely. Foundational to the entire marine food web, supporting animals we depend on both ecologically and economically.
Okay, these forests sound like absolute superheroes for marine life. But do they help us humans too? Directly impacting our lives on the coast.
They absolutely do, in very tangible ways. Imagine a really big storm rolling in, hitting the coast with powerful waves.
Yeah, happens all the time.
Well, those dense, flexible kelp stands act like a natural shield, a buffer. They significantly slow down those incoming waves. Studies show they can reduce wave energy by up to 70 or even 85%.
70 to 85% reduction. That's huge.
It's a massive difference, and that translates directly into much calmer conditions along the shoreline right behind the kelp bed. They are incredibly valuable for coastal protection.
So they literally protect our shorelines. Less erosion, less damage to property.
Exactly. This effect, called wave attenuation, reduces coastal erosion and storm damage, which, saves a lot of money in the long run and protects our homes, roads, and beaches. It's an invaluable ecosystem service that coastal communities get for free from healthy kelp forests.
A natural infrastructure.
A perfect way to put it. Natural infrastructure that often goes completely unnoticed until it's gone.
And I've also heard they play a role in, cleaning the water. Almost like the ocean's own filtration system.
That's another great analogy. They're kind of like the ocean's lungs and kidneys, all rolled into one.
Lungs and kidneys, how so?
Well, the lungs part is through photosynthesis. Kelp produce a lot of oxygen, just like land plants. This dissolves in the water and makes it healthier for all the animals living there.
Okay, makes sense. And the kidneys?
The kidneys part is about cleaning things up. Critically, they absorb huge amounts of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, dissolving it from the water. They act like carbon sponges.
Carbon sponges. So they help with climate change.
Yes, significantly. Their rapid growth and constant shedding means they are continually drawing down CO2. And when fragments break off and sink down into deeper waters or get buried in sediment, that carbon can be locked away, stored long-term. It's a process called carbon sequestration, and kelp forests contribute significantly to it globally.
And does absorbing CO2 help with ocean acidification too?
Yes, that's another key benefit. By absorbing CO2 locally, they can actually increase the pH of the surrounding water, making it less acidic right there within the forest.
What?
And that's incredibly important for creatures like shellfish oysters, mussels, clams, also crustaceans, and those coralline algae we mentioned earlier that help kelp settle. All these organisms build shells or skeletons out of calcium carbonate, and that process is much harder in more acidic water. So kelp creates these little refuges of less acidic water.
A local buffer zone.
Exactly. And they also absorb excess nutrients like nitrogen and phosphorus that often come from coastal runoff, from farms, cities, sewage.
So they filter pollution.
They help filter that pollution, yes. By soaking up those excess nutrients, they help prevent or reduce harmful algae blooms, those red tides or green slimes that can be caused by too much nutrient pollution. So they are quite literally cleaning and regulating our ocean environment, providing crucial benefits to both marine life and us.
Now, just like land forests have different kinds of trees, oaks, maples, pines, I'm guessing kelp forests have different kinds of kelp making up these diverse habitats.
They absolutely do. It's not just one type of kelp everywhere. There are about 30 different genera, that's like the family group, and nearly 150 distinct species of kelp that have been identified.
150 species.
Yeah. And each species has unique features that define the kind of forest it creates. They vary enormously in size, shape, how long they live, whether they form a canopy or stay low. Each contributes uniquely to the ecosystem's structure and function.
Can you give us a few examples? Like, who are the main architects?
Sure, let's meet a few key players.
Okay.
Probably the most famous is Macrocystis pyrifera, or giant kelp.
The really big one.
The biggest. It's the largest marine algae, truly the redwood of the sea. It's the quintessential forest former. It can grow over 60 meters long.
60 meters. That's over 200 feet.
Yep, taller than many buildings. And remember that growth rate. It can grow up to 60 centimeters, or 2 feet, in a single day under good conditions. It forms these vast, dense surface canopies in places like California, South Africa, Australia, New Zealand. And it's a perennial, meaning individual plants can live for multiple years, maybe up to 7 years or even more, providing long-term stability to the forest.
Okay, who else?
Then there's Nereocystis luitkiana, known as bull kelp. You find this one along the Pacific coast of North America, from Alaska down to central California.
How is it different?
It has a really distinct look. One single long stipe stretches up from the holdfast, ending in one large bulbous float, the pneumatocyst at the top, and all the blades trail off from that single float.
Like a long whip with leaves at the end?
Kind of, yeah. It also grows super fast, maybe 10, 18 centimeters a day. But here's a key difference. It's an annual species.
Meaning it only lives 1 year.
Exactly. It grows anew each spring from spores, forms its forest during the summer, and then it's usually ripped out by the strong winter storms. So bull kelp forests have these really dramatic seasonal cycles, dense forest one season, gone the next.
Wow, completely different dynamic.
Totally different. Then you have groups like Laminaria and Saccharina. These include species known as tangle, oarweed, or sugar kelp.
Where are they found?
This is a diverse group common in the North Atlantic, around the UK, Norway, but also found in the North Pacific. They usually look different too. Often a single large leathery blade, maybe strap-shaped or ruffled, and a stiff stipe to help them stand upright without needing a big float.
So they don't form those surface canopies as much.
Right. They often form the understory layer beneath taller canopy kelps, or they might dominate in really wave-exposed areas where the taller, more delicate kelps can't survive. They rely more on the rigidity of their stipe to stay upright.
Interesting. One more, maybe.
Okay, let's go to South Africa. Eclonia maxima, sometimes called sea bamboo.
Sea bamboo.
Yeah. It's dominant in the Great African Sea Forest off South Africa and Namibia. It has a long, hollow stipe, hence the bamboo name, and a single float at the top supporting a cluster of blades. It creates these dense surface canopies, often in really high-energy, wave-battered waters. Its unique structure lets it thrive there. Another amazing architect.
It's truly incredible how diverse they are, all fulfilling similar roles but in different ways. Now, how do these amazing seaweeds actually reproduce? You said they're not quite plants. Do they have seeds like trees, or is their life cycle something else entirely?
It's something else entirely, and it's really fascinating. Kelp have a two-stage life cycle. It's technically called a heteromorphic alternation of generations.
Whoa, okay, break that down for us.
Yeah, sounds complex, but it basically just means they have two very different forms or generations that they alternate between in their life cycle. And these forms look totally different from each other.
Okay, two forms. What's the first one?
The first is the big kelp plant. We actually see the one forming the forest. That's called the sporophyte. Sporophyte means spore-producing plant.
Makes sense. So it produces spores.
Exactly. When it's mature, it develops these specialized reproductive patches, often on its blades, called sori. Within these patches, it releases billions, literally billions, of tiny swimming spores into the water.
Billions. Do they travel far?
Usually not super far. The spores are quite dense and typically settle pretty quickly, often within just a few meters of the parent plant, although currents can sometimes carry them further.
Okay, so spores settle on rocks.
Yeah.
Then what? Do they grow into another big kelp?
Not directly. This is where the second hidden stage comes in. Those spores settle on suitable rocky surfaces and grow into the other generation, microscopic gamophytes.
Microscopic?
Tiny, so small you'd never see them without a microscope. Think of these as tiny hidden seed banks living on the seafloor. They are so inconspicuous they're very rarely observed in the wild.
A hidden seed bank.
Yeah.
That sounds important.
It's incredibly important because here's the amazing part. These microscopic gamophytes can stay dormant, just hanging out on the rocks, and survive harsh conditions for months, maybe even longer. They can survive even if the big kelp forest gets completely wiped out by a storm or a heat wave.
So what you're saying is these tiny hidden stages are really crucial for the forest to be able to grow back, like a built-in resilience mechanism.
Exactly, that's the key. When conditions become favorable again, maybe the water cools down after summer, nutrients return with winter mixing, and there's enough light reaching the bottom, that's when the gamophytes get active.
What do they do?
Well, there are male and female gamophytes. The female produces an egg and releases a chemical signal, a pheromone, into the water. This attracts sperm released from a nearby male gamophyte.
Wow, chemical attraction underwater.
Yeah. After fertilization happens, a new tiny kelp baby and embryonic sporophyte starts to grow. And that eventually grows into the huge kelp plant, the sporophyte that we recognize.
Completing the cycle.
Completing the cycle. So the seed bank of microscopic gamophytes is absolutely vital for the forest's ability to recover after disturbances. It ensures that even if the visible forest vanishes, there's a foundation, a hidden potential for regrowth. It also holds the key to genetic diversity and the potential for adaptation over time.
That is such a cool life cycle. And going back to the growth, you mentioned giant kelp can grow 2 feet a day. That's just unbelievably fast for any living thing. What does that rapid growth mean for the ecosystem itself?
Yes, it's truly staggering. They are genuinely among the fastest growing organisms on Earth. And this rapid growth is precisely why kelp forests are so incredibly productive.
Productive meaning they create a lot of stuff.
Exactly. Biomass, living material.
Yeah.
Under ideal conditions, cool, nutrient-rich water, plenty of sunlight. Those giant kelp fronds, as we said, can elongate by as much as 60 centimeters, 2 feet, in a single day. Bull kelp also grows incredibly quickly, averaging maybe 10 centimeters a day, but up to 18 under optimal conditions.
How do they sustain that?
It's fueled by highly efficient nutrient uptake directly from the water column. And in some species, like giant kelp, those sophisticated internal transport systems we mentioned, moving sugars made in the sunny canopy down to fuel growth in other parts of the plant.
So it's not just a fun fact about speed.
Not at all. It's the engine. This prodigious growth constantly creates new biomass, new structure, new food. It's the engine that fuels the entire ecosystem and supports that vast, complex web of life within the underwater city. It's a fundamental reason why these systems are just so incredibly rich and dynamic.
Okay, so it sounds like kelp forests are incredibly robust in some ways. They have this amazing resilience built into their life cycle. They grow super fast. But despite all that, they're also facing some really big problems globally, aren't they? They're not doing well everywhere.
Unfortunately, yes, that's the hard truth. Despite their inherent resilience, kelp forests worldwide are under really unprecedented threats. And climate change is pretty much right at the top of that list. It's causing both direct and indirect stresses that are hitting them hard.
Because they like cool water, right?
Fundamentally, yes, they are cool water organisms at their core, and the changes happening in ocean conditions are deeply impacting them in several ways.
Like what specifically? Just warming?
Warming is a huge one. Ocean warming and heat waves. When the ocean gets too warm, it's physiologically very stressful for kelp. Just like, you might feel tired and sluggish on a really hot day.
Yeah, definitely.
Kelp struggle too. Warmer waters reduce their growth rates, they impair their ability to photosynthesize efficiently, and it makes them more susceptible to diseases. For many key species, there are clear temperature thresholds, like tipping points. Giant kelp, for instance, really starts to decline significantly around 20 degrees Celsius, about 68 Fahrenheit.
And these marine heat waves we hear about.
Exactly. Extreme marine heat waves, periods of unusually warm water, are becoming much more frequent and intense globally, and these can be absolutely devastating. They can wipe out huge areas of kelp forest very quickly.
Are there examples of this happening?
Oh, absolutely. Southeast Australia, for instance, is an ocean warming hotspot. warming about 4 times the global average in the ocean there. And Tasmania, just off that coast, has lost something like 95% of its giant kelp forests over the past several decades.
95%.
95% lost, just gone. And in Western Australia, a single intense heat wave back in 2011 wiped out nearly 100,000 hectares of kelp forest. It's dramatic. And these kinds of events are projected to become maybe 16 times more frequent by the end of the century if we continue on high greenhouse gas emissions pathways.
Wow. Okay, so warming is bad. What else from climate change?
Well, linked to warming is nutrient depletion. Warm surface waters generally hold fewer essential nutrients like nitrogen and phosphorus, which kelp desperately need to grow fast.
Why is that?
As the ocean's surface warms, it becomes less dense, and it forms a stronger layer, like oil on water, that sits on top of the colder, deeper water. This increased stratification makes it harder for the natural process of upwelling, where winds normally push surface water away and allow cold, nutrient-rich deep water to rise up to happen effectively.
So the nutrients are trapped down below.
Exactly. It effectively starves the kelp forests living in those sunlit surface layers, even if the temperatures themselves aren't quite lethal yet. It's like having the potential to grow, but not having the building blocks, the food to do it.
Okay, warming, lack of nutrients. What else? Acidification.
Yes, ocean acidification is another big piece of the puzzle. The ocean is absorbing vast amounts of the extra CO2 we're putting into the atmosphere, and this is lowering its pH, making it more acidic.
Doesn't kelp use CO2? Is that good for them?
Kelp can use some of that extra CO2 for photosynthesis, which might seem like a benefit. However, the overall effect of more acidic water is generally negative for the ecosystem because it harms so many other organisms living in the kelp forest.
Like the shellfish.
Exactly. Shellfish, crustaceans, those crucial coralline algae that help kelp settle, all these creatures need to build strong shells or skeletons out of calcium carbonate. More acidic water makes that process much harder, chemically speaking. So it can disrupt the entire food web and even hinder the kelp's own ability to establish new growth if the coralline algae suffer.
So it weakens the whole community?
It weakens the whole community fabric. Finally, related to climate change, we're seeing stronger storms. A warming climate fuels more intense storms, generating bigger, more powerful waves.
Which just rip the kelp out.
Yeah, they can physically rip entire kelp forest right off the seafloor, causing widespread destruction. This direct physical removal just compounds all the other stresses from warming and nutrient depletion, creating this kind of perfect storm of challenges for kelp.
Okay, that's a lot from climate change. Now, I remember in our sea otter episode, we talked a lot about sea urchins and how otters eat them. What happens if there are too many urchins in a kelp forest? How big a problem is that?
It's one of the most common direct causes of kelp forest destruction globally, and it all comes down to that critical ecological balance. When you don't have enough predators around,
Like the otters.
like sea otters, yes, but also certain types of sea stars, lobsters, specific fish species, when there aren't enough of these predators to keep the sea urchin populations in check, their numbers can just explode.
Why would the predators disappear?
Often it's due to human activities. Overfishing is a big one, removing too many lobsters or urchin-eating fish. Or it can be disease outbreaks, like the devastating sea star wasting syndrome that hit the Pacific coast a few years back. It functionally wiped out the sunflower sea star, which was a really important urchin predator in many areas.
Right, I remember hearing about that. So when the urchin populations explode, what exactly do they do to the kelp?
Well, these huge aggregations, these armies of sea urchins, become incredibly destructive. Their feeding behavior changes when their numbers get really high. Instead of just passively eating the bits of drift kelp floating by, which is their preferred food when populations are low, they switch to actively grazing on the living attached kelp. They start chewing right through the base of the kelp, the holdfasts, and the lower parts of the stipes.
Oh, wow. So they cut them down.
They literally mow them down. They often move together in these large groups, sometimes kind of raising fronts, and they systematically clear the entire forest one plant at a time.
And what does that leave behind? How bad is the impact?
It can completely deforest an area. It turns a beautiful, vibrant, bustling kelp forest into what scientists call an urchin barren.
Urchin barren.
Yeah.
What does that look like?
It literally looks like an underwater moonscape. Just bare rock, maybe covered in some tough, low-lying algae that urchins don't like as much, and just a carpet of sea urchins everywhere. Almost no kelp remains.
That sounds bleak.
It is. And here's the really challenging part. The urchins can survive in this starved state for decades. They don't grow much, they don't reproduce much, but they persist. And just by being there, they prevent any new kelp spores from settling and growing back into adult plants.
They just camp out and prevent recovery.
Exactly. It's like having maybe too many hungry goats in a field. They eat all the grass down to the roots, and then they just stay there, nibbling any tiny new shoot that tries to pop up, preventing the meadow from ever growing back.
What's a good analogy?
This shift from a kelp forest to an urchin barren is what ecologists call a phase shift. It's a remarkably stable but degraded alternative ecosystem state. And it's incredibly difficult to reverse back to a kelp forest without some kind of active human intervention.
So it's not just these big global climate issues hitting kelp forests. There are also other things, maybe more local things that we do that can hurt them too. A kind of death by a thousand cuts.
Yes, that's absolutely right. Many local human activities can also weaken kelp forests, making them less resilient and even more vulnerable to those larger climate challenges. It all adds up.
Like what kind of local impacts?
Well, pollution is a big one. Runoff from farms and cities often carries excess nutrients, nitrogen, phosphorus into coastal waters.
Isn't kelp supposed to like nutrients?
It does, but too much can be bad. Excess nutrients can fuel blooms of tiny, free-floating algae, phytoplankton, or sometimes other fast-growing seaweeds. These blooms can make the water cloudy, increasing turbidity.
Blocking sunlight.
Exactly. Blocking the sunlight that the kelp on the bottom needs to photosynthesize, so it effectively starves the kelp. Sediment runoff is another issue from coastal construction, agriculture, logging.
Makes the water murky too.
Makes it murky, reducing light, and the sediment itself can actually settle on the seafloor and smother those microscopic kelp babies, the ganophytes and tiny juvenile sporophytes, preventing them from growing. Toxic contaminants from industrial discharge or city wastewater can also directly impair kelp growth and their ability to reproduce successfully.
Okay, pollution.
What else? Overfishing, as we touched on with the urchin predators. When we remove too many of the animals that naturally eat sea urchins, like lobsters, sheephead fish, sea otters in some places, we disrupt that crucial top-down control in the food web.
Letting the urchins take over.
Precisely. It allows urchin populations to explode and create those barrens. This removal of predators is considered a primary driver of kelp forest loss in many parts of the world, triggering those trophic cascades that lead to ecosystem collapse.
And direct damage from fishing.
Yes. Destructive fishing practices can be a problem too. Things like bottom trawling, where heavy nets with rollers or chains are dragged across the seafloor to catch bottom fish. That can physically tear up kelp forests and completely destroy the rocky habitat they need to attach to.
That sounds terrible.
It is. Even things like boat propellers cutting through the canopy or anchors being dropped carelessly can cause significant localized damage. And then there are some really extreme examples, like in northern Chile, there's a practice called barreteer.
What's that?
It involves fishermen using crowbars to literally rip entire kelp plants out, including the holdfast, to harvest them for the alginate industry.
Ripping out the holdfast.
Yeah, which means the kelp can't regrow from that spot. It's essentially clear-cutting the underwater forest. This intense harvesting pressure prevents the ecosystem from recovering its structure and function. It's a whole range of local pressures adding to the global ones.
Wow, okay. That sounds like a really significant and complex set of problems facing kelp forests. Climate change, urchins, pollution, fishing impacts.
Yeah.
Feels a bit overwhelming. But I know people aren't just giving up, right? Are there really effective ways we can help kelp forests recover and maybe even thrive again?
Absolutely, and that's the crucial message here. There is a tremendous amount of hope and, more importantly, a lot of action happening globally right now. There is a growing movement of scientists, conservation groups, indigenous communities, fishermen, coastal residents, all working tirelessly to protect and restore these vital ecosystems.
That's great to hear. So what are the first steps? If we want to help these underwater forests, where do we begin?
Well, one of the most effective foundational strategies is to protect the healthy kelp forests we still have. And a key tool for that is establishing marine protected areas, or MPAs.
Like national parks, but in the ocean.
Exactly like that. Think of them as designated zones where certain human activities, especially fishing or habitat destruction, are limited or prohibited.
So they create safe zones. Does that really help the kelp directly?
It helps the whole ecosystem, which in turn helps the kelp. By protecting the entire community within the MPA boundaries, including those important predators that control urchin populations, kelp forests inside these protected areas tend to be much more resilient to disturbances.
Is there evidence for that?
Yes, strong evidence. For example, back in California, after that severe marine heat wave and the sea star disease hit, a landmark study compared kelp forests inside and outside of established MPAs.
And what did they find?
They found that the kelp forests within the MPAs recovered much faster and more robustly once conditions improved.
Why was that?
Because inside the MPAs, populations of key urchin predators, like the California sheepheadfish and spiny lobsters, were healthier because they were protected from fishing. These predators were able to keep the urchin numbers down, which then allowed the kelp to rebound quickly once the water temperatures cooled off. Outside the MPAs, where predator numbers were lower due to fishing, the urchins often took over and prevented kelp recovery.
So MPAs act like a crucial first line of defense.
Absolutely. They help preserve those complex ecological interactions, that web of life that gives an ecosystem its natural resilience to bounce back from challenges.
Okay, that makes sense for protecting what's still healthy. But what about those places that have already flipped? Those urchin barrens you described.
Yeah.
Can we actually bring the kelp forests back once they're gone and the urchins have taken over?
Yes, we absolutely can. But you're right, in those established urchin barrens where the ecosystem has already shifted to that stable, degraded state dominated by urchins, simply protecting the area passively within an MPA usually isn't enough. The urchins are already there in high numbers and will prevent natural recovery.
So we need to actively step in.
We generally need active intervention, yes. We need to help the ecosystem shift back toward the kelp-dominated state. And the essential first step in restoring an urchin barren is almost always to reduce the density of those grazers, the sea urchins, down to a level where kelp actually has a chance to settle, survive, and grow.
How do people actually remove the urchins?
There are a few ways it's being done. Urchin removal often starts with manual efforts. Teams of scuba divers go down and carefully remove the urchins.
How do they collect them?
They might collect them, or sometimes, especially if collection isn't feasible, they might carefully cull them, basically cracking their shells underwater. This method has been proven highly successful, especially at local scales where volunteer or research teams can put in the effort.
You mentioned a project in California.
Yes, in Santa Monica Bay, there was a fantastic long-term, community-driven effort led by groups like the Bay Foundation. Over many years, volunteers and divers removed an incredible 5.8 million purple sea urchins from former kelp forest areas.
5.8 million.
Yep. And as a result, they help restore over 80 acres of productive kelp forest. It shows that dedicated effort can really make a difference.
Are there other ways besides divers picking them up?
Yes. In some places, resource managers try to encourage or incentivize commercial fishing for urchins. The urchin roe, called uni, is a delicacy in many cuisines.
Right, you see it in sushi restaurants.
Exactly. So if you can create a market or support the existing fishery, it can help reduce urchin numbers while also providing economic benefits, turning a problem into a product, essentially.
That's clever. Any high-tech solutions?
People are experimenting. There's research happening, particularly in Australia, looking into using autonomous underwater vehicles, basically Terminator robots equipped to identify and cull urchins automatically. These are still in very early trial phases, though, facing lots of technical challenges.
Terminator robots for urchins. Wild.
It is. And in some large-scale restoration experiments, particularly in Norway, scientists have used chemical methods like carefully applying quicklime, which is toxic to urchins, but less so to other organisms when used correctly to clear large areas. But that requires very careful management.
Okay, so step one is often getting rid of the problem grazers. Once the urchins are under control, does the kelp just come back on its own? Or do we need to plant it, like underwater gardening?
That's a great question. Sometimes, if there's a healthy kelp forest nearby, acting as a source of spores, and the conditions are right, the kelp might recover naturally once the grazing pressure is off. The spars just drift in and settle.
But not always.
Not always. If the barren area is really large or if it's isolated from healthy spore sources, natural recovery can be very slow or might not happen at all. In those cases, active reintroduction might be necessary to really kickstart the recovery process. And this is indeed where we become underwater gardeners.
Okay, how do you garden underwater with kelp?
There are several really innovative techniques being developed and tested. One that's showing a lot of promise because it could be lower cost and more scalable is called green gravel.
Green gravel. What's that?
Basically, scientists take small rocks or pebbles into the lab and seed them with tiny kelp spores, or sometimes the microscopic gamophytes. They let the little kelp plants start to grow on these pebbles in controlled conditions.
So you get tiny kelp plants growing on little rocks.
Exactly. Once they're established, these seeded pebbles are then carefully scattered from a boat across the restoration site on the seafloor. It's literally like planting tiny kelp seedlings already attached to their own little anchors.
That's much easier than diving down to plant individuals.
Potentially, yes. It avoids harming existing donor kelp populations by just collecting spores, and it allows for treating larger areas more efficiently. This method has shown success in projects in places like Australia, restoring golden kelp in Port Phillip Bay, and trials are happening elsewhere too.
Cool. What other gardening methods are there?
Other techniques involve growing kelp spores on ropes or lines in the lab until small plants develop, then deploying those seeded lines out onto the reef. Or people might anchor mesh bags filled with fertile kelp blades, blades that are ready to release spores directly onto the seafloor in the restoration area.
So you concentrate the spores right where you want them.
Exactly. It releases a high concentration of spores right over the target area to maximize the chances of settlement. There's even a really novel technique being tested called the reef duster.
Reef duster, like dusting furniture.
Sort of. It uses a special underwater blower device operated by divers to spray a concentrated solution of kelp spores directly onto the prepared reef surface. It's like reseeding the barren area with high precision. Lots of ingenuity going into this.
Definitely. Thinking back to the climate change problem, since the oceans are getting warmer globally, can we actually help kelp adapt to these changing conditions? Is it possible to breed stronger, more heat-tolerant kelp?
This is a truly exciting and, frankly, a really critical area of research right now. Scientists are actively exploring ways to enhance kelp's resilience to warming, often referred to as assisted evolution or selective breeding.
So looking for super kelp.
Essentially, yes. The process starts by looking for natural variation within existing kelp populations. Even within a species, some individual plants might naturally be a bit more resilient to warmer temperatures than others, just due to their genetics.
Finding the tough ones.
Finding the naturally tough individuals. Scientists can then bring these potentially heat-tolerant strains into the lab and selectively crossbreed them, aiming to produce offspring new juvenile kelp that inherit this enhanced resilience.
And do they test if it works?
Oh, yes. They then test these selectively bred strains under simulated heat stress conditions in the lab or in controlled field trials to see if they genuinely grow better and survive longer in warmer water compared to typical kelp.
So we're essentially trying to help kelp evolve faster to keep pace with climate change, giving them a better chance.
Exactly. That's the goal. It's about leveraging the natural genetic diversity that already exists and giving evolution a helping hand to cope with the rapid environmental changes we're causing.
Is this being done anywhere specific?
A prime example is the work happening in Tasmania, where, as we mentioned, they lost about 95% of their giant kelp forests due to marine heat waves. Researchers there are intensely studying the genetics of the remaining 5% that managed to survive.
Looking for the resilience genes.
Precisely. They're looking for the specific genetic traits that made those survivors stronger. The ultimate aim is to cultivate these more resilient strains and then plant these tougher kelp babies back out into the ocean as part of restoration efforts. It provides a real proof of concept for developing climate-resilient kelp strains that could be crucial for future-proofing restoration and even kelp aquaculture efforts. This research also highlights something interesting about the life cycle.
The microscopic stage.
Yes. It turns out that the microscopic gamestoid stage often has a higher thermal tolerance than the big sporophyte stage. So that hidden seed bank might be even more important for surviving heat waves and facilitating natural recovery than we previously thought. This whole area is a real sign of hope and a critical frontier of kelp science actively trying to prepare these vital ecosystems for the future they're facing.
That's really encouraging. Now, all of this, the urchin removal, the underwater gardening, the genetic work, it sounds like a massive undertaking. It clearly requires a lot of different people and groups working together, right? How does this collaboration actually play out on the ground?
Oh, it absolutely does. Success in kelp forest restoration and long-term protection truly hinges on collaboration. You need to bring together diverse groups with different knowledge, skills, perspectives, and resources. It's not something one group can usually do alone.
Can you give some examples of successful collaborations?
Sure. There are great examples emerging all over. Local initiatives. We mentioned the Help Our Kelp project in Sussex in the UK. That was driven by local filmmakers, conservationists, and the community working with regulators. They successfully advocated for and achieved a local bylaw that prohibits destructive bottom trawling across a large area, giving the kelp beds that used to be there a chance to recover naturally.
So policy change driven by the community.
Exactly. And in Puget Sound, in Washington state, here in the U.S., you have groups like the Puget Sound Restoration Fund working closely with partners like the Samish and Suquamish tribes, the Seattle Aquarium, government agencies like NOAA,
Using all sorts of tools.
using everything underwater robots, ROVs to survey, satellite imagery to map extent, lab cultivation techniques, and critically, incorporating the invaluable traditional ecological knowledge of the tribes who have stewarded these waters for millennia. It's a real partnership approach, citizen science, and everyday people can get involved too. You don't have to be a professional scientist. Programs like Reef Check California, for instance, train volunteer scuba divers to collect important ecological data.
Like adopting a reef.
Yeah, they adopt specific reef sites and conduct standardized underwater surveys year after year. These volunteers contribute thousands of hours and generate invaluable long-term data sets on kelp abundance, fish populations, urchin densities, data that help scientists and state managers track changes over time and across large areas. It dramatically extends the reach of research. Indigenous-led conservation, and this is absolutely crucial. Indigenous communities are increasingly leading conservation and restoration efforts, blending their deep, long-standing traditional ecological knowledge, often called tech, with modern scientific methods.
That seems really important.
It's vital. Their relationship with kelp forests is often built on millennia of observation and principles of reciprocity and stewardship. This provides invaluable wisdom for effective management. A landmark example in the U.S. is the proposed Chumash Heritage National Marine Sanctuary off the coast of California.
What's special about that?
It's the first national marine sanctuary ever to be nominated by an indigenous tribe, the Chumash people. It ensures that their ancient wisdom and cultural values will guide the protection and management of that coastline, championing a truly collaborative co-management model between the tribe and the federal government. Economic incentives. And sometimes, conservation can even align directly with economic benefits, creating win-wins. Remember Lime Bay in the UK?
They protected the reefs?
Yes. After mobile fishing gear like trawls were excluded to protect the reefs and allow recovery, the fishermen who switched to more sustainable static gear, like pots for crabs and lobsters, actually saw their incomes increase by 20 to 50%.
Wow, they made more money.
Yeah, with about 50% less fishing effort. And they started catching more and larger lobsters and fish as the habitat recovered. It powerfully demonstrates that sustainable practices that protect the ecosystem can actually be more profitable for local communities in the long run.
Any other economic ideas?
People are exploring concepts like restorative aquaculture. The idea is to harvest those overabundant, unhealthy, empty urchins from the barrens, bring them into a land-based facility, and ranch them, feed them sustainably sourced algae until their roe develops and becomes high-value uni.
So you turn the pests into a premium product.
Exactly. It creates an economic incentive to remove the problem grazers, potentially helps fund the restoration work itself, and creates sustainable seafood and livelihoods. It's about finding creative solutions that benefit both the ecosystem and the people who depend on it.
It really is a story of from little things, big things grow, isn't it? Seeing all these diverse efforts from local communities to high-tech labs coming together.
Indeed it is. We're often starting with relatively small, localized restoration patches, learning crucial lessons as we go, adapting our techniques, and building those strong, essential partnerships with local communities, scientists, indigenous knowledge holders, and resource managers. The ultimate goal is to figure out how to scale these efforts up, create self-sustaining kelp populations where they've been lost, and empower everyone to be part of the solution for protecting these incredible underwater forests. These efforts, combined with bigger global policies like the push to protect 30% of the ocean by 2030, give us genuine hope for the future of kelp.
#outro. What an absolutely incredible journey we've taken today, exploring the hidden wonders and the critical importance of kelp forests. We've learned that these magnificent underwater cities, built by truly ingenious seaweed, are not just beautiful places, but absolute powerhouses for our ocean and really for our entire planet.
Absolutely. From being critical nurseries, sheltering countless young species, and acting as a vital food source that connects the smallest plankton right up to the largest whales, to serving as natural shields protecting our coastlines from storms, and helping clean our waters by soaking up carbon and nutrients, kelp forests are truly unsung heroes that underpin so much marine life.
But we also heard the tough parts, the serious challenges they face from warming oceans, for those armies of hungry urchins, and from various human impacts. Yet, amidst those challenges, we heard about the amazing collaborative and innovative efforts underway worldwide to protect and restore them. It's a powerful reminder, isn't it, that their future is really inextricably linked to our own health and well-being.
It truly is. The story of kelp forests reminds us just how deeply interconnected life is on this planet and how vitally important every single part of our global ecosystem really is. Understanding the delicate balance within these underwater jungles and the threats they face is absolutely essential if we want to preserve the health of our oceans and our planet for generations to come.
Thank you so much for joining us on this incredible story today. We really hope you enjoyed learning about these vital, dynamic underwater jungles as much as we did sharing it.
And as you think about the ocean, maybe the next time you're near the coast, or even just thinking about climate change, consider this.
Mm.
What small action, maybe what new piece of knowledge you gained today, or what connection can you make in your own life to help protect these amazing swaying forests that quietly do so much for all of us? Every little bit helps build that larger movement for change.
See you next time on Saltwater Stories.